Welcome to the WEI Tech Talk podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Murphy. I'm a cybersecurity solutions architect here at WEI. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, Blair Canavan, the director of PKI and PQC at Thales. Welcome, Blair. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Shawn. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to jumping into it too. Just for a reminder to our audience, this is effectively part two in a conversation about post-quantum crypto. Check out part one, where I interview Patrick Hines. He's the founder of the Entangled Things podcast and also the CEO of Pulsar Security. They do some services around post-quantum. And in that episode, we went real deep in the science
Uh-oh.
of quantum computing. I know, Blair, you would have loved it. Um, but I promised in that episode a discussion about, okay, so now that we understand the science and the threat, what do we do about it? And so that's the goal of the conversation today. Before we jump into the content, though, Blair, do you mind giving our audience a little bit of your background, where you came from, and why you're interested in quantum?
Oh, that's a long. Yes, I'm certainly going to
In,
try.
in 30 words or
So,
less. No.
yeah, in 30 words or less. Woof, let's try. So my background is culminated in about 35 years in the cybersecurity space. So my original leap into this business was a little company called Symantec, where I was the first employee in Canada. So if you're wondering what my accent is, I am Canadian. Living in British Columbia now. But yeah, so I started in the early days of antivirus, if you can remember those days when people all suspected that we were writing the viruses. Do you remember those days? And we said,
Mhm.
no, there's enough nutty people out there writing these things. And here we are with malware 35 years later still. But I did a bunch of years in the crypto space with an early startup called Chrysalis. And if you all know Luna hardware security modules, we started that company in Ottawa, Canada in 1995, 96. I was the 10th employee, I think, back in those days. And here we are. That's a 30-year-old journey that led me back to Thales just a few years ago, where I was recruited back primarily because I know a few things about quantum and PQC and PKI and all those things. So because I was around that space, early days of VeriSign and Entrust and all the major public key infrastructure players, it was just a natural thing for me to come back and as a contributor. So my quantum experience started about 8 or 9 years ago, working with the likes of Dr. Tahir Al-Gamal at InfoSec Global, and of course my relationship with all the, I guess, if you will, the notables in quantum or post-quantum around the world. So I'm part evangelist, part strategist, an alliance guy. So basically people say, Blair's the quantum guy, ask him. So here I am.
Really interesting. Well, I don't have quite as strong a background, but I did I think 5 or 6 year tour of duty at RSA Security, and you have to know your crypto to work at RSA.
Yes.
So I got a strong background in crypto, and then I studied physics in undergrad. So I was super excited that those two worlds collided eventually.
Yeah.
Um, so the first topic I wanted to dive into is just a quick summary of the risks that quantum
Mhm.
poses to our infrastructure. I know we have CNSA 1.0 right now that was ratified in 2015, and that gave us an algorithm suite that is potentially at risk. Do you want to summarize for our audience what that risk is? And
Yeah, certainly at a high level, I think everybody who's somewhat or fairly familiar with why we're talking about post-quantum cryptography is the eventual deprecation of what we all know as RSA and elliptic curve, or MLD as, no, sorry, I have to step back. Let's just focus on, let's say, RSA and ECC, elliptic curve. Those are the
Diffie-Hellman,
two.
right?
Yeah, thank you. So we all appreciate that the algorithm suite that we rely on, that's embedded in current, what we would call classical cryptography, that stuff works. It's not broken. So our current, I think people need to refresh themselves that we are working today in a very a solid framework or underpinning of crypto, and that's great, and that's a testament of 25 years of those algorithms, also the variations and versions of those, and the optimization of all those algorithms to make them useful everywhere. So that's why that's why they're embedded everywhere, because they work.
Hmm.
So let's move on to obviously the near future, the imminent expectation is that we're going to have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer in the next few years. I spend very little time predicting the future because I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't think you do. And I know a lot of people would like to think that they have this all figured out, but it's reasonable to think that within the next 3 to 5 years, and I say 3, that's really on the really early side. But there are some companies that are predicting 2028 that they're going to have enough, quote, horsepower or enough qubits, and I say qubits meaning logical qubits, that are going to render RSA 2048 and Diffie and ECC obsolete use running Shor's algorithm. That's a bit scary, but pragmatically speaking, swapping those out is the intent. And we have the CNSA 2.0 spec, which will make it, quite frankly, simple to see that whether you're a network device manufacturer, whether you're a Cisco or a Fortinet or a Palo Alto or any of the big ones around the world, or you're a browser, or you're anything to do with public key infrastructure, public key cryptography, everything, code, firmware, everything is going to have to be updated and upgraded, which is a massive, if not the largest undertaking of cryptographic change in history.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's everywhere, and we rely on it, as we should. So that promotes, or that is obviously the problem, is how are we going to get all that swapped out and updated? It's really hard. So that's what the conversation is really about, is change management and how we're going to make this happen, how we're going to automate some of it, how we're going to have to do some of it manually, how we're going to have to find it before we can fix it. So I'm sure you've got lots of questions around that, so I'll stop here.
Yeah. Well, going back to the threat, if
Mm-hmm.
we have a quantum computer that's capable of cracking the existing asymmetric key protocols that we use today,
Right.
what would the implications be? We talked in the last episode about the harvest now, decrypt later
Right.
threat, which although we may not have a quantum computer today, a lot of nation states could just gobble up everything on the internet, and then once they have a quantum computer, could go back in time and decrypt.
Mm-hmm.
And that presents a risk to certain industries, but the fact that I made a financial transaction today probably isn't super valuable to the Chinese
Right.
government 5 years from now. But
Right.
the fact that we're installing a nuclear silo in XYZ country could be a risk.
Yes.
And then we also talked a little bit about the risk of a rapid breakthrough in the science, which is always possible. To your point, like we
Right.
don't have a crystal ball. It could happen tomorrow. In fact, I
That's
saw a
right.
headline last night that Google made some significant advances and published a research paper recently. So that led to this concept of Y2Q, the idea that Y2K was a very similar event where it was all hands on deck to fix all of our operating systems to support the change into the new century, and we're going to have a similar effort to make our systems quantum ready. The difference is we knew when Y2K was, and we don't know when Y2Q is. So I think that sets up the nature of the problem. Again,
Right.
I would suggest that listeners go back and listen to that first episode where we go into those
Right.
threats in more detail.
Right.
Um, but that motivates the solution to the problem. And you briefly touched on CNSA 2.0. Did you want to elaborate on what changes were made and how that helps address this problem, this threat?
Yeah, I'll try to give and again, I'm not as I say ultimately aware of all the minutiae within that, but let's look at it at a high level. That
Mhm.
CNSA 2.0 really encapsulates the entire spectrum, as I said, of device manufacturers, software manufacturers, those that are, let's look at it from a commercial point of view. Anybody who's building products like Thales or consuming products like Thales, we expect that the products that come to us will have PQC readiness either built in or architected in and shown to be PQC safe over a period of time. In 2025, I have seen companies shift immeasurably from complete indifference in the last couple of years to, whoa, that deadline has approached or has already passed. For example, with CNSA firmware and code, and I'm very comfortable to tell you this, that most of the large laptop manufacturers that have have the embedded chipsets from the Intels and the AMDs. Guess what? They're already PQC safe. Why do we know that? Because we're the root of trust for that. And we've been that root of trust for well over 25 years when I was starting to work with those exact same manufacturers. So this is testament to, this is why we're doing what we're doing, because you need to make sure that organizations can rely on what they already have, that they're not ripping and replacing everything for something net new, for example. That's a good, so CNSA 2.0 is saying, hey, by the end of September 20, or the end of 2025, boy, I'm stumbling this morning. Your software and or your firmware should be, when I say PQC safe, you should have that ability to provide either hybrid or full-on PQC capabilities. Mostly what you're going to see is a transition from classical to hybrid to full PQC over the next few years. So that, of course, transgresses over to all the browsers. So the CA browser forms. So all of us that we all use CAs, we just might not know it, but all of us have server TLS and SSL certs. All of us are using any type of public key certificate, hence the issue of certificate sprawl. You've got millions of these things within banks and governments and commercial operations. All of that is shifting to CNSA compliance. And then you're going to have the niche players. And what do I mean by niche or niche? You may rely on, depending on the industry you're in, think of the industrial side of things. You may rely on stranded asset management or asset management within a stranded. When I say stranded, we build satellites. You have to have secure telemetry to those satellites. You can't push them into or launch them into space and tether them back and upload. You're starting to see announcements, including Thales, that we have PQC safe telemetry to supporting those environments, because they don't just, it's not just us putting something into space with one of our satellites. This is one of our business units. It's the fact that this is being used for a commercial application. And those applications are what drive the demand for integrity. Integrity is, you got to have code that is safe from compromise, and you have to have trust that instruction set sent and beamed up into space is actually doing what it was intended to do. So I loved the broader look at this, and I'm going to answer, by the way, back to your Y2Q. You're absolutely right that unlike Y2K, where we had a right to left approach, meaning we knew when that date was going to hit, and all of us said, oh, okay, we've got 2 years, now we've got 1 year, now we've got 6 months, we've got 6 days. We all know what happened. It wasn't as big an impact as we all thought it was going to be. But preparation was essential. We all don't want to, if we hadn't have done anything, it might have been the reverse for all we knew. But Y2Q, we spend less time predicting that. But the way to look at it is, what if Y2Q was a year from now or 6 months from now? If Google, or with their Willow chipset, if IonQ does what they say they're going to do in 2028, they're going to have a CRQC. What if these things and the combination of error correction capabilities that is continuously improved, what if we really do hit something within 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And what I mean by that is enough logical error-free qubits to break RSA and ECC. Well, then you tell me how your preparation's going. Where are you in that? And I think that's what we talked earlier about this before the call was, what's your plan?
Yeah.
If you don't have a plan, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, so we've thrown around the acronym PQC a couple times, and there's other acronyms like, quantum safe, or there's quantum ready.
Right.
So in general, this just means adopting the new encryption algorithms that don't use quantum to make the asymmetric key exchange more secure, but they're quantum difficult. So we can use our current classical computers to use these standards on classical computers, even though a quantum computer doesn't exist yet. Just wanted to clarify that for the audience.
Yeah,
so
that's
the
a good
PQC
nuance
standard,
that people might miss. You're absolutely right.
and those have existed for a while, right? CNSA came out in, what is it, 2022, according to my notes. And you just talked through it, but I wanted to share a little visual for our audience, because
yes, that would help me too. I'm going by the same visual you have. Yeah, so I mentioned the software and the firmware and the web browsers and networking OSs.
Amazingly, this is what we should be implementing today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because we're already partway through 2025, approaching
Yeah.
2026. So yeah, our web servers should all be using PQC. Um, Traditional networking equipment is going to start to come up for the
Oh, yes.
transition. Your operating
We're seeing
systems. You
that.
said that a lot of
Mm,
our operating systems are already supporting this, which is excellent to hear,
mhm.
et cetera, et cetera. But up here, we're like well on our way to having to uh, adopt PQC. And one of the things I want to get back to the concrete steps our customers can take to
Yep.
improve their posture. But one of the things I think we talked about in one of our prep calls is don't make this problem worse. So if you're
Right.
buying new network equipment today, for
Correct.
example, make sure that it's PQC capable because you don't want to have to rip it out 3 years later when you're taking this problem
Right.
seriously.
Right. Yeah, you
Yeah.
couldn't be more astute on that point. If you're buying, think about your cryptographic debt or your technical debt. Everybody hears these terms kind of battered around, but think about your infrastructure. Some of the stuff that you've relied on for decades, including HSMs or name your load balancer and anything web gateway, all those networking devices you've relied on. If they don't have the ability to shift to your point, quantum safe, or if they're not crypto agile, which is a real, unfortunately, it's being used quite openly and without really understanding what that really truly means. Crypto agile isn't just swapping in and out the algorithms, and we all understand that you need to have that flexibility. It's also about end to end. It's one thing for that networking device to support PQC, but what about the actual session connections? What about the browser connections with
Mm.
OpenSSL and all the other things coming along, and any version of TLS that you rely on and you're moving to? Everybody has to understand that there's a lot of moving parts, and so that ecosystem, it's what I live and eat and breathe every day as behind the scenes. This is a nightmare for those that are managing these infrastructures because why? They've been exactly the same in some respects for 20 plus years. This is the ultimate change management. It's like a haystack that you now have to find all the needles in the haystack, and then they all start glowing as potential compromise points. We've never had that in our history, and crypto was so buried and so obscure and not understood that now the nerds in the basement, I don't want to say Shawn, maybe you and me, but a lot of us are now pulled right up onto the carpet and saying, walk me through, what's our exposure here? What do we have to do? How long is it going to take us? Are the vendors even helping us the way they should be helping us? This is a really interesting debate and conversation going on at every single company that's a certain size and scope, but certainly the small to medium enterprise is not immune either. So we've got some work to do. We got some work.
Yeah. Yeah, I know when you can find this CNSA 2.0 timeline on Wikipedia. That's where I pulled this image from.
Yep.
But when I saw this, I immediately got very overwhelmed and I thought to myself, we're WEI is a relatively small network, but for
Yep.
some of our enterprise customers, they have huge networks, very complex interactions, as you were just describing. I find this very overwhelming, but you shared with me a sort of roadmap for how customers can
Yeah.
break this problem down into more manageable chunks. Did you
Yes.
did you want to walk through that
Yeah,
roadmap a little bit and
absolutely.
talk?
If you want to throw that up, I can walk
Yeah.
through easily with and again, think of this as I've been talking through this with a lot of customers for some time now, probably going on upwards of 2 years, and working with large enterprise support from the likes of the IBMs and the Accentures and Deloitte's and very large organizations assisting those in need. And with WEI, everybody's going to play a part in this. There's not going to be enough hands in the world. Just that's the scary part. There's not
Mhm.
enough people and resources to get all this done. So what do? You can't fix it all. So what we're starting to see is at the very minimum is something that you understand, Shawn, is that you need to assess or provide some assessment, some, let's call it a baseline within an organization as to where they're at. And that baseline is really essential because although you might not want to do this undertaking, you have to.
Hmm.
And procrastination is also a part of this issue, which is if I just keep kicking the can down the hall for a couple more years, it's somebody else's problem. So this is now you're starting to see board level um, um, discussions, push down saying, "Hey, everybody, what's our exposure? Where are we with this? We can't afford this as a major bank, a major commercial end. Nobody wants this, the news on a Monday morning to reflect that we were not prepared." So this PQC assessment on the left is really essential. And sometimes it's a matter of putting together a tiger team. You'll see things coming out of Thales and other partners that we have uh, legitimizing what we've all heard and used over the past, which is if we've got a problem, like let's say it's malware, we put a tiger team together to say, what's the effect of Heartbleed, or what's the effect of name your malware here that affected us. But this is confined to what's our exposure, meaning what are we relying on externally and internally? So we have our cloud providers, but we also have all of our on-prem capabilities and all the partnerships and the ecosystem of vendors that we rely on. So there's an assessment period that sometimes will be anywhere from a week to 6 weeks for larger enterprise. And I'm involved in a lot of these, and they're really comprehensive and they're really fantastically interesting because it's for the first time in most companies' history that they do this. And then you'll find organizations are shifting very quickly into doing cryptographic discovery. Why? Well, how do you prescribe, or how do you come up with a plan when you don't even know the scope of the problem? Unfortunately, this is going to bring back some circumstances and some situations and some issues that you might not have been aware of. It's going to identify, for example, certificate sprawl. It's going to identify key sprawl or key mismanagement. We
Hmm.
know this because we build key management capabilities. We build encryption tools. But we don't do certificate lifecycle management. So there's an ecosystem that comes in that will address these. I don't want to say low-hanging fruit because that makes it sound like it's an opportunity, which maybe it is to some. If you're if you're an
Yeah.
optimist, Shawn, maybe you look at this as, hey, it's time to clean house and we're going to get this all sorted out. But
I
then it goes back to this whole test environment. Yeah, go ahead. You're going to
Oh
say.
yeah, so you're gonna cover each one of the steps, but I just wanted to pause on the risk assessment. So is that
Yes, sure. Yeah.
a an effort where the business goes through and looks at all of the systems that use cryptography in some way, shape, or form, and kind of deciding how vital that asset is to their business, and then kind of prioritizing? Is that what you're
Right.
doing in that effort?
Yeah, and I think that this is a wide open conversation, depending on who you speak to. We've
Mm,
seen things as simple as, look, we're going to look at everything that we do internally, as in other words, how we interface with each other, business unit to business unit. That's one. But anytime we have any externally facing application development, customer apps that we provide, as let's say a bank and so on and so forth, anything we produce from this point forward, everybody understands it's got to be PQC safe, right? It goes back to your earlier point. We can't continue to build things that we built the same way for 25 years. No different than building an earthquake proof building. Oh, well, we don't know how to build those yet, or we're just going to build it like we've done for the last 30 years. Those days are over.
hmm.
Those days are done. Software development lifecycle management has undergone a massive shift. We're now shifting. So we have a line now that we put in the sand, which is a really good tool internally, which is anybody issuing any applications, building anything going forward must have post-quantum built in. And I say post-quantum safe built in, which might mean as simply as we can cryptographically or crypto agile wise, we can take out an algorithm, pop another one in. That's the simplest way to look at it.
Yeah, I
But
think
there's
you've
much,
described
much,
that
much more.
as like a
Yeah,
running in hybrid mode essentially,
you
where
got it.
you can
You
support both. Yeah.
Because if you build anything hard coded from this point on with RSA or ECC, you know how difficult that is to swap that back out programmatically. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing. We're going to see that's the nice flexibility that we're building in going forward is it's not just the algorithms. As I said, it's how those algorithms are consumed or leveraged throughout the ecosystem.
Okay, so that seems manageable. It's a
Yep.
maximum 6 week effort where you're kind of
Yeah.
cataloging all of your apps and thinking about um, the risk that they
Right.
pose to your business.
Right.
And then you started to go into the second step, which is creating an inventory and doing
Right.
discovery. And you used an expression, I think, in one of our prep calls about crypto posture management, which is
Yes.
this trend of adding posture management to everything, like AI posture management, cloud posture management.
You got it.
But um, I like the idea because this is the biggest hygiene issue we've
Yes.
ever faced. Like, in cloud posture management, you had a bunch of S3 buckets.
Yep.
I think the number of certificates most organizations have is 100 times that.
Yes. Yeah, we went through one of these exact exercises with a large customer. I think there were about 300,000 users. And I might be a little plus or minus on that. And they came back and said they had 3 million certificates that they were concerned about. Some of them are automated, but 90% of them are not. Can you imagine the manual labor required to manage that kind of infrastructure? So that's your point. Hygiene, you're spot on. This is, by the way, the opportunity to move into an automated. We're not going to do things we've always done just because they worked. We're not going to keep a spreadsheet of our certificates anymore. Anybody that even says that in a meeting out loud, is it's on one foot out the door, or doing something else real quick around the company. But we're seeing this hygiene issue as the preeminent most important thing. Is this is the opportunity. Let's get ourselves set up. And by the way, those assessments include people, this whole people, process, and technology. You have your tiger team, you have people, your stakeholders. You are going to have your executive management coaching you through this and sponsoring you through. And when time comes for asking for budget, you got to have that in the assessment phase. You have to talk about it, and you're laying the groundwork so that when you go up and say, like you see here, I'm going to build a test environment. Well, why? Well, because I have to trust but verify. I believe those vendors, I believe those technologies, but I got to verify. This is what's going on with a lot of large organizations right now, is they're repatriating or rebuilding their cryptographic centers of excellence. Because, as I said, if you didn't have to do it for 20 years because it just worked, what were you spending time in a lab for?
Mm.
Now those labs are reemerging as critical parts of the cryptographic posture management, meaning we've got the right people, we've got the right vendors. By the way, the vendors that aren't supporting this or are not capable of this or are not showing or demonstrating leadership in this area, I'm not suggesting they're kicked out, but they're no longer part of that community, trusted advisory group. And that's one of the things that I think is really important. Is you're going to find out real quickly who your friends are.
Mm.
You're going to find out real quickly who the ones are that are supporting this effort, and those that are just kind of, you know, jumping on the bus at the last minute per se. But we are seeing a mix of that coming up in the vendor community, that those that haven't taken it seriously, have not architected this in, have shown no road mapping. Just saying, it comes back to who are you going to work with going forward. So there's an opportunity, I guess, in that respect, to consolidate your vendor sprawl, which we all
Mm.
know is a problem. And by the way, acquisitions impact that almost on a daily basis. What does that mean from a cryptographic posture management point of view? Do they have the same baseline of PQC readiness across their product lines and across their
Mm.
business units? Things like that.
Yeah, yeah. And then I can see why testing is important, like you said, trust but verify, because you
Yep.
might do your risk assessment, you might go do your discovery and think you know all of the weak points in a system, but they're big and complex and lots of different systems communicating, and you might find the weak link in the lab and just go back to your crypto posture management tool and add that as a something that needs to be updated at some point. That makes
And
sense.
Shawn, there's a thing, you'll hear things coming out like quantum security maturity index from people like Accenture or from IBM or from others, giving a grade, a score. And we
Mm.
all understand scoring systems or scorecards, right? You've been
Yeah.
around it. I've heard it. We
That's
know
that's a
how that.
great tool for executives. Like, we're a C, and they hate that. You see them start to grind their teeth, and okay,
Yes,
we
yes.
need, we want to be an A because our competitor's an A.
Right? And
Yeah.
there are many, I could list them off publicly, and they're well into their public, into the public domain of describing this. The Wells Fargos, the HSBCs, the BBVAs, these large banking institutions that we interface with, that I work with on a regular basis. They're very proud of the fact that they are leading into, walking into this. And it kind of goes back to the point of, when you find out that you are still running large, very critical infrastructure on deprecated crypto, custom crypto, which I don't even know you can put those two words in the same sentence, or proprietary crypto, even funnier, is we at the top had no idea that you were, again, you had an operational environment. Let's be clear, it works. It's not broken, maybe it hasn't been compromised, but we no longer can rely on that infrastructure. That's the same as any building that goes up in New York or San Francisco, or those things can wobble, the large skyscrapers, because they're built differently. They're more flexible. They don't do things the way they always did them just because they could. So this is where I'm seeing really, really good adherence to the new way without changing everything dramatically. This is not a complete taking cryptography out of something and replacing it with something completely new. No, we're just making sure this stuff is more flexible.
I like it. Yeah, and then we started this episode with a discussion of the threats, and
Yep.
that's to sort of motivate how serious this problem is.
Right.
But there's a flip side of that coin, which is how do we make this a business enabler, or how do we make PQC initiatives a differentiator? And I think it goes back to that use case of, if we're ahead of our competitors and we're more crypto agile, I think that's the expression you used, then maybe we're in a position to capitalize on opportunities that our competitors are not. So there's a way to sort of spin it as a positive too, internally.
Yeah, there is. And I think we have to be realistic that some organizations will use this distancing or capability to distance themselves from each other. Hey, we all believe in competition, but I will share with you that in the banking community, for example, depending on what part of the world you're in, for example, if you're in the Netherlands, there's by law, they must share progress in this specific field. So
Wow.
bank to banks can't hold out on each other. And we all know that that's not uncommon with large consortiums, right? The FSISAC, which is the consortium of banking members, I'm now participating in the PQC working group alongside our friends at Wells Fargo and others, because this is too serious. This is not an opportunity to see another fall. So one banking institution is not going to celebrate the demise of another because they weren't ready for this. So
That's a
there's a
great point.
lot of pressure on organizations to seek consensus. Hopefully it's unanimous, but you're never going to get unanimity because obviously the debate as to when this is coming and how this should be built is still a very healthy way to approach this. I wanted to throw in, healthy skepticism is super important, but confirmation bias is the death roll. This is what you can't afford to have in an organization, is those with their arms crossed. By the way, I can't really show on camera. I've seen that. Arms crossed, this isn't happening. This is not my problem. You guys are overstating the problem when really there's not an issue. We're going to just shift over to this thing like we've done in the past for everything we've done. I cannot stress, this is nothing like we've ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think we all want to see the outcome as we're in this together. Even our competition, I'm next week, I'm in Kuala Lumpur with all the all my competition and industry brethren. We get together, we talk about compatibility, we talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it very openly, but how you implement it in terms of optimization or performance or things. Those are things that are left to competition. And that's, I don't think, is ever going to change. But we do not want to hold out on each other. That is one thing that we're critically aware of in this industry.
That's a good point, and I'm sure that's a big part of your job as Director
Yep.
of Alliances, is
Yeah.
interfacing with the broader community and sharing standards and building a plan for everyone to
Yes.
get quantum safe. Um, so did you want to touch on Thales and your products and how you're incorporating that sort
Sure.
of leadership in the quantum domain into
Sure.
your products and services?
Sure. As I said, I started in this space in 1996. Again, just like everybody else, just use the standard crypto that's available. The standards meaning the ones that are sanctioned by NIST and so on. And we've done that for 25 plus years, now 30 years and counting. So the good news is that the HSMs and the high-speed encryptors that Thales is producing, the smart cards. I just showed you this before our call this morning. This is the first smart card in our company that is PQC safe. This is our identity and biometrics team. So you may see these as national identity cards. And if you want to read it, it says the Republic of Utopia. And this is an example of a PQC safe smart card. Well, why would I mention that? Well, our business unit doesn't build smart cards. It doesn't build satellites or defense equipment. But you understand that as Thales is a much broader organization, most people realize that because of this, PQC runs across as a undercurrent of capability. We can't afford to lag just because one business unit is doing something different than the other. So even though you may not know this, we're the world's largest credit card manufacturer. Most
Oh,
people, if you open up your wallet, look at the back of it, you might see Thales on there if you got a
wow.
MasterCard or an Amex or whatever. Yeah, we build SIM card and SIMs and eSIMs and all these things. So this is important for us. Our group, which does the HSMs, the Lunas, the Cipher Trust encryption and key management platform, our high-speed encryptors, we absolutely support PQC today, meaning that you don't have to rip that stuff out of the rack anytime soon. Until you get to a headway or you get to a scenario where your expectation is the same performance across the board. All of the entire world is facing this concern, which is you got bigger and longer keys that just don't perform as fast as RSA 2048, which, by the way, we've optimized over the last 25 years. You're starting to see vendors, whether it be Qualcomm building a chipset going into a mobile phone, the iPhone and the Androids around the world, or Samsungs, you name it. Everybody's under the same. They just got the algorithms last August from, again, these are the certified standards coming out of NIST. So we've got our MLDSA, MLChem, etc., and Sphinx. Those are still undergoing optimization. So we're doing the same. We're going through this process of optimizing to get to the kind of performance that you expect. So that's going to be a bit of a transition for some. Good thing is with PKI and code signing and things like that, they're not highly transactional. So transactions per second is not that big a deal.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, we also know that anytime you're doing SSL or TLS offload, and you're now swapping in or dropping in MLDSA, for example, that thing is going to run real slow. So that
Oh,
means all the
really?
network equipment vendors who are using IPsec, guess what? That's going to take the heaviest hit. So
I'm so
don't
glad you
expect, yeah,
I'm so glad you brought that up because I was doing some research on the new standards, and the ML Chem is a 1024 key length instead of a 2048 key length. So it's half the size of the key, but you're saying the encryption algorithm itself is taxing to the hardware. Very
it's taxing.
interesting. Wow.
Yeah, this is the essential. Do we run it native? Do we offload? Do we have co-processors? Do we optimize? And
A6.
and
Yeah.
yes, yes. So next generation for us, let's just say Thales has that up their sleeve. Can't say
Uh,
too much. Can't expose too much publicly. But Thales has been doing this a long time, and that our incumbency gives us a really wide swath of use cases. So some of our HSMs, we have sometimes 10, 20, 30,000 of these things running around some enterprise. We have to get it right. So we're working on those things as we speak. The good news is, as I said, for the generic use cases of transactions per second, the current Luna HSMs, we simply upgraded the firmware, dropped in the latest algorithms from NIST. Business as usual if you want to use them. What we stress, of course, is that most organizations are still in the testing phase, and some are implementing, as I said, laptop manufacturers building this in at the manufacturing phase of their chipsets and their laptops that are using those chipsets. But not everybody has flipped the switch over yet. So the good news is the use cases and the number of customers going full production on PQC is just beginning. So by the time that things go to and are rationalized and publicly available, and we're all comfortable enough to flip the bits, so to speak, 2026, 2027 is when you're going to start to see commercial operations absolutely running in hybrid, full hybrid, or even, dare I say it, they might run in pure PQC shorter than or sooner than we think.
wow, that's very optimistic. I think that's a great place to end the conversation. Just a quick summary of the ground we covered because it was a lot. We started with kind of covering the quantum risks and what that poses to typical enterprises. We talked about the solutions in CNSA 2.0 and how that can be implemented. And then I got overwhelmed at that task, and you walked us through a roadmap that Talis has put together for how to get there with a sort of measured program type approach, which
Mm-hmm.
settled my nerves a bit. And then I love the point you just ended on with Thales has been in this space for a long time and offering thought leadership inside of a community. And I think our customers should reach out and ask if they are curious about
Absolutely.
this topic. And we'd love to connect them with their Thales counterparts to learn more. So thank you so much for joining me today, Blair. I hope you had a good discussion, or I hope you enjoyed the discussion, I should say.
Absolutely. Yeah, Shawn, it
Um,
was great. And I love the word curious. I tell people all the time, be more curious. Read, listen, attend this. You guys have done a terrific job. Go see these podcasts. Go to Bright Talk and type in Thales Quantum. Go into all these places that you might otherwise have not had time for, because some of these webinars will illuminate you beyond what you expected in a very short period of time. So I think this is a great opportunity to learn and shift into the new paradigm.
Great. Excellent place to end. Thank you so much.